Welcome to this Mastery Empowerment course. This is Parallel Lives, and this is wonderful because we can tap into skills and talents and bring them into this incarnation. Dr. Bruce Goldberg is a renowned hypnotherapist, and he is leading our session today. Welcome, Dr. Bruce. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure to reincarnate on this mastery course. The basis of this is that if any of the attendees out there, if they're not happy with their life and there are certain things in their past or present that they cannot change and that has limited their experiences, instead of just suffering and limiting this, what they can do is actually switch into a parallel universe. Or they can just explore the parallel universe just for their own curiosities, either way. So let me just give you the big picture of what we're going to be doing today. This is going to be what I call a major example of psychic empowerment, meaning that I'm going to be using hypnosis during the, after I give my formal presentation. That will be about a good 30-minute exercise in which I will be training you to access your higher self, to raise the frequency vibrational rate of your soul's energy, to empower you, build up your confidence. We're going to do several exercises, and then we're going to do the pièce de résistance, as I call it, where I'm going to be guiding you into your higher self so that you can lay out the different pathways and you can choose your ideal path. So the way this works, we're talking about age progression is really the term here. And what that means is going into the future of this life. So the way this works on the principle level is that the current soul that you have right now has a certain range. We call this a frequency vibrational rate. And for the most part, it's compromised, or else you'd have a perfect life. So what happens is we want to raise the frequency vibrational rate of your life right now, of the soul, on this particular frequency or parallel universe, because this universe we're on now is a parallel universe, okay? And then that will affect all the other parallel universes, because although you have an infinite number of souls and parallel universes according to quantum physics, which is technically known as quantum mechanics, you only have one higher self. So the higher self that we're going to connect you with monitors all your parallel lives. So it's a very important procedure. Sometimes it takes a little time for people to actually switch tracks because the higher self has to monitor all these other lives, not just the one you're on right now. So you have to be patient here, okay? I don't control the system, neither do you consciously. It's done by your higher self. There are many improvements that you're most likely going to make as a result of the webinar. Please do not give me the credit for this. You do 99% of this. I'm responsible for 1% of training. And when I make that statement, everybody seems to ignore that, okay? You actually, your higher self and you working together, your subconscious, are responsible for literally 99% of the success and progress. One of the criticisms that my colleagues and other people who are not colleagues of mine but are well-read always say to me, Doctor, you can't go into the future, that's impossible. Well, that's not true. First of all, in quantum mechanics and astrophysics, once you enter the space-time continuum, such as going out of the body, which is what you're going to be doing during the hypnotic level, all hypnosis is an out-of-body experience. Now, the space-time continuum exists in which all past, present, future, and parallel life experiences all occur simultaneously. So yes, you can see into the future, what we label the future, which is going on right now. So there are things you say, well, that sounds a little weird. What about examples of how people have gone into the future and have documented this and they're real? So let me give you an example. There's an author, a novelist that no one's ever heard the name of. I have, and some scholarly people have, but most people have never heard of it. His name is Morgan Robertson. I guarantee you none of the attendees have ever heard of him, unless they listen to my interviews. Morgan Robertson in 1898 wrote a novel called Futility. This novel had the basis of an unsinkable ocean liner struck an iceberg, carrying the elite of society of two different continents to their deaths. 14 years later, in 1912, an unsinkable liner sailed from England to the United States with 3,000 passengers. Like Robertson's craft, it was 800 feet long. You got the dimensions. It weighed 70,000 tons and had too few lifeboats. That liner was known as the Titanic. In Morgan Robertson's book, The liner was called The Titan. Isn't that interesting? How did he do this? The guy was brilliant. Well, what he did was he read the Akashic records. So he went into the future, which of course is occurring right now. You see how it works? Now, there's a term that I need to differentiate in this field. This is where it gets a little bit complicated. The term is called parallel selves versus parallel lives. Now, a parallel life is when you perceive your parallel universes. But sometimes you can meet someone in your current frequency that shares the same oversoul or higher self. That's called a parallel self. Okay? So very simply, let me give you a little quick case history. This is a salesman I worked with years ago in the East Coast. He lived in Baltimore, and he used to go to Midwest for sales meetings and to sell his products. But he never went north of Chicago. Okay, so he wanted to use the techniques that I work with, and I said, okay. So in the experience hypnosis, he finds himself going to Cleveland. He's never been there before. Okay, and he meets a person who actually is representative of his higher self. In other words, it's a parallel self. He gets her name, her address, her telephone number, everything, right? So now he comes out of trance and he says, doctor, what do I do? And I said, look, you're going to go to Chicago sometime in the near future on your sales things. It's not that far to go to Cleveland, just a few hundred miles north. Why don't you use your sales technique and schmooze with her and meet her? I guarantee you she exists. So he did, okay? I can imagine the conversation. So he calls her up. She doesn't know who he is. She feels a little odd, but he seems to know a lot about her because they would share a lot of common interests. So she decides to meet him, and they did. They had a meeting. He went up to see her, and he just told me it was the weirdest thing he ever had in his entire life. They both felt very uncomfortable, but they knew each other. So this is called a parallel self, not a parallel life. It's the same frequency. In my own personal case, I do like to throw myself into my research to show you that I practice what I preach. In 1992, I was contacted to do a movie for television, The Search for Grace, my CBS movie. And about a year and a half later, the movie was put into what they call developmental hell. There was a lot of problems politically, internally in the network, which had nothing to do with me or my writer or producer. Apparently, some guy was going to sue the network. There had all kinds of problems, all kinds of hissy fits. And project was tabled, okay? So the writer, who's a friend of mine that I knew from the East Coast many years ago, he was panicking. He was like, I call him Alex. He's the kind of guy that no matter how much money he makes, he's always in debt, people like that. So he wanted the movie to air, because if the movie airs, he's going to get a lot of money, as will I, by the way, for publicity. So Alex said, Bruce, they're not going to air the movie. What are we going to do? And I said, I'll fix it. He says, the network doesn't want to hear from you. And I said, I don't deal with those energy vampires. I have my own ways of doing this. So he goes, whatever. Okay, so I used a new you technique on myself. Now, what I did was I perceived myself going into the future by over 25 years. The frequency I selected, not only did the movie air, but I had many things happen to me over the years. Personal relationships, professional things, business deals, people I didn't know at the time. When I was in those days, remember this was 1994 when the movie aired, May 17th specifically. I was doing interviews with Art Bell on the Coast to Coast network. And I didn't know about anybody else on that network other than Art. He was the one who set up the network. As I'm going through these progressions, I see this guy, and I humorously talked to George about this. I said, this guy looks like a Greek fisherman. And this is a guy who I would be interviewed with after the year 2000. Again, I didn't know who George Norrie was in 1994. As it turns out, that happened. 2003, I was introduced to George, and I do my umpteen network interviews with him on a regular basis. So the movie aired. I worked with George, of course, who I didn't know of at the time, and many other things happened. So I made the switch. The universe that I'm in right now is not the universe I was in 26 years ago. Okay? Now that universe is still going on, and I had a pretty good life. This one's better. Okay? So you go with the better one. Okay, so what prevents people from doing things like this? Or what prevents people from having an empowered life? The answer is fear. Fear is a destructive and limiting state of mind that manifests itself as an emotion. It is the result of negative programming. And it can be removed by self-hypnosis, because everything we do here is self-hypnosis. The media is not your friend. They will program you and brainwash you to be negative, cynical, skeptical, and tell you how nasty and stupid and evil you are, okay? Society does that in general. The corporate world, religion, you name it. Any bureaucracy looks for money and power, and that's at your expense. That's my observation. I'm trying to be objective. I'm a scientist. Okay, so to heck with the bureaucracy, let's deal with your higher self. So we're going to focus in on using these techniques to help you to empower yourself. Now, when you do so, there are certain behavioral types you need to learn about. Passive, aggressive, and assertive. Most people in the world today, not just this country, around the world, 80% of people are passive, which means they don't take charge of their life. They're easily manipulated. They don't argue and complain and whine about things, maybe to somebody else. But if somebody takes advantage of them, they just say, well, I'm never going to do business with you. And meanwhile, they allow the person to victimize them. That's terrible. You are just going to be asking for it. The universe, law of attraction, you'll get more people doing the same thing. So you don't want to be passive. The opposite is what I call the used car salesman approach, the aggressive response. People yelling and screaming, getting angry, high blood pressure, they get heart attacks, and they try to manipulate and aggressively beat your head in symbolically or psychologically, okay? Not a good response either. The best response is only about maybe 10 to 15% of the population is the assertive response. You protect yourself from being victimized, that's the first level, and then you try to negotiate with people or try to get them to get their act together. Many a times they won't. That's not your problem. But your point or your issue is not to allow victimization and to be confident and empowered about everything that you do. That's what assertive. If you want to see an example of assertive, look at the camera carefully. I'm an assertive dude. I'm a New Yorker, okay? Go Yankees, okay? Got that? All right, anyone could be assertive, okay? It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter whether you're from the Southeast, Northwest, Midwest. It doesn't matter. Anyone can be assertive. My philosophy, assertiveness is next to godliness. So when we do things like this is what I call a win-win-win situation. When you empower yourself, not only do you improve, but everybody who connects with you improves. Your family, your friends, coworkers, you're sending out positive energy. So you're going to affect them indirectly. I call this distant healing. Very nice, okay?
All right, here's a question. How does this differ from quantum jumping?
Well, quantum jumping is, you can call it quantum jumping. I know they're talking about it. Maybe there was a film about quantum jumping and the teleportation. Okay, let's focus away from Hollywood for a moment. Okay, it's not really quantum jumping in the sense that, let me give you the analogy. Let's say you're watching a television show and you're watching your local NBC affiliate, okay? Your best friend calls you, your BFF calls you and says, hey man, you gotta switch to ABC. It's a better show right now, just run, you gotta watch it. So you take your little remote and you switch channels. What happens to the frequency, which is what a television signal is, on frequency on the NBC show? Does it disappear into the vortex and the whole black hole? No, maybe hundreds of thousands of people are watching that show. You're simply switching channels. The soul is electromagnetic radiation, identical to a TV signal or a computer signal. So when you say jumping, the only thing that's jumping is your awareness of which frequency you're on at that time. You're on all of them at the same time, but you're only aware of one of them. You're going to be aware of frequency, let's say 4, rather than number 1, but number 1 still goes on, as does 2, 3, and 5, you see? So when you say quantum jumping, it's only your awareness that's jumping. The universes aren't going anywhere.